we are now talking to Simply Amazing podcast host and Isles Fix contributor, Tim Ryder. What's up, Tim?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the connection issues.
That's all right, man. We know it. I mean, we got Tyler. We got to look at his hairline the whole show, so that's enough for us. Anyways. So we see that you're a contributor to the Islanders, the Mets, and the Chicago White Sox, I'm hearing. So before we get into some of the questions that we're going to have, first of all, how did you get into these positions? How did you get these positions? And why Chicago? I mean, you're the Islanders, the Mets, and the Chicago White Sox?
I always kind of followed the White Sox from afar. The opportunity came across. I have some friends who cover the site, who cover the team over at Southside Sox. And, yeah, the opportunity came up. I said, sure, I'll expand my horizons. As for the Mets, I guess I started with Metsmerized in 2017, and that lasted until, I guess, this past winter, and I started the Apple, and here we are.
So, by the way, we are talking to Simply Amazing podcast host and Isles Fix contributor Tim Ryder. Why don't we get into some baseball first, because the World Series and the playoffs are going on right now. The Mets are eliminated. The Chicago White Sox are eliminated. So why don't we go into the Mets first, because we got some Met fans listening to us right now. The Mets, this might be the first time we've seen a baseball team fire two managers in the same year, okay? Two managers that couldn't keep their hands or their eyes off of their phones, and the other one can't keep their hands off the booze, okay? So what are your thoughts this offseason for, with the management, with Cohen, with Sandy Alderson? Who do you think is the next GM for the New York Mets? And if they and that person that you think they're going to bring in, what do they need to do to change this roster to make this team a playoff team?
They certainly have their work cut out for them. I know they had their three big choices that have all kind of passed on the job. So, they're going to have to kind of go out there and find. It's not going to be a big ticket name, but it's going to have to be someone that fits their needs. With regards to the roster, I mean, you have a foundation there, especially offensively. You have your Pete Alonso, you have Francisco Lindor, but and again, Lindor didn't have a great season. He finished off a lot stronger than his numbers look. I guess tell, but there's still a lot to there's a lot to do with regards to reinforcing the roster, and I think that's where this year's team kind of fell short. You didn't really have the performance that you were counting on from a lot of guys, and whether they go into next season with your Dom Smiths and Jeff McNeils in starting roles, I think that kind of remains to be seen. I think Jeff McNeil's kind of suited for that utility role. Dom Smith has shown his versatility. He's shown his ability to hit off the bench too, and if he's not going to be your everyday left fielder, I still feel like, one, that's a hole to fill, and two, you kind of got to find somewhere for Dom's bat to go. And with the DH coming in, there could be an opportunity there. But there's kind of a lot there's a lot on the docket this winter for sure.
So the biggest thing, I think, is in terms of Baez, giving him the money he wants. You trade Pete Crow Armstrong, was a first-round pick for him, so the Mets have to lock him up. So what do you see his contract looking like, both with lengthwise and with the overall money and the average annual value, being he's a young, talented player?
I think that for any team interested in him, and I do think the Mets have the inside track on him. I know we heard some reports this week that there might be some agreement in play, possibly, and I think that would kind of benefit everybody. The Mets will probably get him at not a discounted rate, but a price that's not going to be inflated by the market. Realistically, I think that a 5-year deal, $22 and $25 million a year, would probably make everybody happy. If the Mets are looking to move forward, and Baez is still relatively young, and if they want to, I'm not sure if they're looking to lock into another 10-year deal. If you look out across the league, like Carlos Correa, who's said he's willing to play third, this is a guy who's going to command an 8-year deal or maybe even a 10-year deal. The Mets already have Lindor. It's a lot. So if they can lock him into 5, that could really be a win-win for everybody. If he's the Baez that we saw over the second half of last season, that's just huge for the Mets.
So obviously we're going to switch up right now because, screw New York. So Chicago, the White Sox, right? I think them and the Blue Jays, as far as youth movement goes, have the fast track on everybody. And I think they're going to run the American League for a very long time. What do you think the White Sox need to go get in the offseason to make themselves a playoff contender, to World Series favorite?
Well, I think starting pitching is kind of where they fell short in the playoffs. As a Mets fan, I think, well, as all Mets fans, most of them, I think a lot of people want to see Marcus Stroman back in Queens. Personally, if he doesn't land back in Flushing, Chicago, south side of Chicago, would probably be an ideal spot for him. Big ballpark. He keeps balls on the ground. He limits home runs. I think he's top 10 in the majors over the last few seasons, including this year, in home runs per 9. I think he'd be a great fit there. Dallas Keuchel, he hasn't been effective as of late. There's going to be a lot of interesting options out there, and I think this goes for the Mets. This goes for the White Sox. The Yankees are going to be in it. You have to assume the Red Sox and the Astros, after what we see, might be jumping into that pool as well. So you're going to have to kind of feel around and find the best deal. But if any team's looking for quality, I think Stroman probably might be that guy, especially if for a team like Chicago. But on the offensive side, I think you hit it on the nose. Them and Toronto, of course. Just so many young, talented players. You got Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada. That's just a triple threat, for years to come, and they're under contract for a while. It's a really nice base if they can kind of fill out the holes, same way the Mets are doing, same way a lot of teams are doing. If they can fill out the holes they need to this winter, that's a bona fide World Series contender.
Tim, getting back with the Mets, because there's a lot of questions with the New York Mets. We were just talking about the management. We were just talking about their roster. You mentioned Francisco Lindor. Now, Francisco Lindor did not have a good season. Yeah, I think he had 20 home runs or 22 home runs. His RBI ratio was like 62. I mean, he was batting .222 the whole season. At one point, he was batting .156, okay, for the first month of baseball. So this guy got paid a lot of money. You're talking about 300. What is he, a third highest paid player in all of the major leagues? He was overpaid. Now we're talking about Javier Baez. Now, they could get a discount. He is a 5-tool player. But how about the stuff that was happening when he went there? He started with the Yankees and Giancarlo Stanton. He put his thumbs down, and that was a big story. Steve Cohen sticking up for the fans. Him and Lindor doing the things that they did, not only on the field, but obviously off the field. And some of the things that has gone on with this Mets team over the years, we've seen this before. We know Rodriguez, he was beating up his father-in-law in the dugout. I mean, the Mets. The Mets have had some crazy things happen over the years. It doesn't matter who the owners are. The Wilpons, the Coupons, whatever you want to call them, to Steve Cohen, who opened up his pockets in the offseason for over $600 million. So when you look at the Mets right now, do you see Steve Cohen again open up his pockets this offseason? And by the way, I love what you had to say about the Blue Jays and the Chicago White Sox, and they have a good roster, but we have seen good rosters, good teams, young players really not develop of what we thought they were going to be. So as good as that roster looks, and as good as they've played in the last year, 2 years, I still don't trust those rosters until they get over the hump and actually do the things that they need to do in the playoffs and in the regular seasons, what the Blue Jays have not done. And the Chicago White Sox, who are one of the best teams in baseball, lost in a first round in a 5-game series, which I believe they should have won. So with the Mets, where do you see the Mets, this Lindor move, the Baez move? Because you were saying that they're probably going to bring Baez back, but it scares me if I'm a Met fan because Lindor's there for 11 or 12 years, and if he does what he did last year, this coming year, I don't know what the Mets are going to do because they have brought in guys that just don't produce in New York.
Look, I'm going to start with the core, and I know I touched on it a little bit before, but look at Michael Conforto. And that'll kind of tie into Lindor as well. Michael Conforto, I guess since like 2017, he's been about 30% better than the average major league player. Per his it's weighted runs created plus, which is it's a gauge against the average. So if he's 130 weighted runs created plus, he's 30% better than average since like 2017. So that's taken into account his downtime after the shoulder surgery, his really bad this 2021 season going into free agency. I guess it comes out in the wash. And, of course, this year had really high expectations. But it kind of speaks, like you said, to developing, and don't get me wrong, it's a lot to develop these, homegrown players who were draft picks, high draft picks, in Conforto's case and Dom Smith. It's an accomplishment in itself. Again, like you said, getting them over that hump is kind of the telltale sign, whether you have a winner or not. And we've seen it the past 3 years. There's been times when the Mets have been competitive, but at no point have they really been a World Series contender. I think that whoever the front office is made up of, and it starts with Cullen, of course, and his money, because you have to imagine he's going to be putting a lot of investment into this team. I'm sure he feels the heat just as the team feels the heat and the players feel it. He came in to be a winner, and this was not an ideal first season in any capacity. Off the field, there was just as much trouble as there was on the field. I do think that Cohen is going to spend money, and as far as Lindor, he started off the season historically bad. I actually, on Simply Amazing this week, I was talking to my buddy James Mastrucci. This is Believeland. It's Cleveland site over in Ohio. And he said, you'll see these down periods from Lindor, but you never really saw anything like that. If anything, it could be compared to his 2020 season. It was the same thing. He started off really, really slow and then picked it up. And that's kind of what he did this year. If you look at his numbers from July 1st on, he was pretty much Francisco Lindor, the same guy he's always been. There was the injury, of course, the oblique for 5 weeks in there. But I think over his last, I want to say 200 and something plate appearances, his slash line was pretty much exactly what it's been, during his peak. Of course, the start of the year was so bad that it really never brought his numbers back. I do have confidence he'll be that same player again, and putting good players around him is only going to take the pressure off him to be that main guy. And if I do think Javier Baez would be, an ideal addition. Mm-hmm. If you look back at Baez's days with the Cubs, he wasn't always this elite player. There was a lot of ups and downs, but when he's on, he's absolutely on. And what I did like that I saw when he came over this year, that free swinger, that wild swinger that you saw so much in Chicago, it kind of disappeared. It kind of turned into a more disciplined Javier Baez, and we all kind of saw the results. And yeah, there was a lot of nonsense on the peripheral side as far as the thumbs down and the starting with Stanton and the Yankees. I guess when a team is winning, that's different. I guess at the time they probably still had the opportunity to make some waves, but again, at the end of the day, I was talking with Rich McLeod over at Just Mets about it on, I think, just today. At no point did this team really give you the idea that, okay, cool, they're playing well, they're doing some magical, fun stuff, but is this team really going to win the World Series? And, even as the most optimist Mets fan there is, even I have to say, no, probably not. And I think that's where they have to start and say, hey, where do we go next?
So one of the biggest things in the first half was Jacob DeGrom having an MVP caliber season, then deciding to opt into not pitching his last start, wanted to pitch in the All-Star game, then didn't pitch in the All-Star game, and didn't pitch at all in the second half of the season. So who do you blame for that the most with that whole drama that happened? Do you think it's on him? Do you think it's on ownership? Could there be something on the inside with front office? What do you think is the biggest reasoning for that?
Well, taking into account that we probably don't know all the details of how that went down, you have to imagine that the Mets knew that there was ligament damage from the start, but really just didn't, make that public. Once it did come out, DeGrom did speak to the press, and you could tell he was kind of apprehensive, and to be honest, he looked a little pissed off. I hope I'm not overspeaking, but you could tell he looked a little angry that it even got out. And he said, nope, I'm fine, I'm good. And he worked his way back, and I think that's a plus that he could have come back and started the game at the end of the year. But at that point, when there's nothing on the line, and he is working to get himself back to 100%, I think I'm okay with him opting not to. I don't know if it's an organizational decision or just his, but I'm fine with that because it still brings him into the off season on a regular schedule. He's not working to get himself back to 100%. Losing DeGrom certainly it hurt the Mets. Let's say he missed 15 starts and let's say the Mets won 12 of those. 12 more wins makes a big difference at the end of the season. And, maybe if DeGrom's around, maybe the Mets put a bigger push on the trade deadline. There's so many what ifs. As far as, bottom line, as a Mets fan, I want to see Jacob DeGrom come back healthy next year. And if this is part of that plan, I'm okay with it because he's a really big part of the Mets' success.